Let me welcome everybody to the Future Trends Forum. This is the place where we take a look at current trends that influence the future of education as we know it. I'm Brian Alexander, I'm the host of Future Trends Forum. I'll be your organizer and cat herder for the next hour. So let me welcome everybody here. I hope you're ready for an exciting time thinking about policy and thinking about where education can go. So before I go further, I need to say a bit more about the Future Trends Forum and where it came from. One piece is that it comes from the Future Trends in Technology and Education project. That's a research project I've been running for several years now, which is an ongoing environmental scan that takes a look at current trend lines involving technology and other forces, including economics, demographics, and policy, trying to figure out what's going to happen next with education. If you haven't seen it before, check out the hashtag FTTE or just go to the website ftte.us, get some sample downloads and get a sense of it. Now, we couldn't do this work without the help of two very, very generous sponsors. The first is NYSERDNet from New York State, who have been a generous sponsor at FTTE for the entirety of this year, and we're very grateful to them. Along with NYSERDNet, we also have Shindig, and Shindig provides support on two fronts. One of them is technological. This is the platform that we're using right now. And the other is human, that they have a wonderful team of people who do a great job just making sure that all of us are connected. They're very patient, very smart people. So I thank Shindig deeply for their strong contributions to the forum. Now, today we're looking at the issue of policy, and we're looking at equity and other issues involving technology and education. And I'm very, very pleased to have as our guest Manuela Ekowo, who is the education analyst at the New America Foundation. If you don't know the NAF, they are a think tank that's been working for years now, trying to explore questions of, well, just about everything in American politics, culture, and society. Very, very influential work, very thoughtful. I strongly recommend paying attention to them. Manuela is their education point person, and now we'll bring her up on stage so we can start talking with her.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Brian, for having me and allowing me to speak. I'm really excited to be joining you all today.
Well, really, really grateful for your time. I'm glad you could make it. So you're in DC right now, right?
I am, yes, hot and humid.
I would say enjoy, but at least enjoy the air conditioning while you can.
Yes.
And can I ask, just to get people started, how long have you been with the New America Foundation?
Sure. So I started in November of 2015, so just under a year. And I'm a policy analyst here, and I research and report on policies related to technology and innovation in higher education, how we're changing the way we deliver education services, learning, and support students throughout their academic journey on college. And a critical component to that is also how
that sounds like a dream job to me.
It is. It really is. I'm lucky to be there.
Sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. I think I've got about a 1 second lag, so I'm sorry if I trampled on you.
No problem.
You're going to say a bit more, please.
Mm-hmm. So the other piece of my work is also ensuring equitable outcomes for underrepresented students, and that piece is becoming increasingly more important as we think about the shifting landscape in higher education, who higher education is serving. It's not the students of the past, but the students of today and of the future, which look very different.
Well, that might be a great place to start. From your perspective, how is the traditional undergraduate becoming non-traditional? What are some of the ways that post-secondary students are different from where they used to be?
Great question. So the current system and the current structure and students they differ in the sense of where they're coming from and when they what kinds of education they're interested in pursuing, as well as the kinds of education, the time at which they're pursuing their education. So in the past, the traditional student typically was the traditional 18-year-old who's coming directly out of high school. but data and statistics show that this trend is actually decreasing. The additional high school 18-year student is no longer that's not on the upswing, it's on the downswing. And so higher education institutions are looking to serve a more diverse population. And that's what we call non-traditional or a post-traditional student, which is a lot older. The student typically is working alongside going to school. They may have families, and so they have different obligations that require that they are able to access post-secondary education in a more convenient way. And so that's where technology and online learning and different formats of how of delivering post-secondary education becomes really valuable and critical for these student populations.
What's driving that change? Is it mostly demographics, or is it the changes in the labor market where people need to go back to college to reskill for a transformed job situation? Or is there some other driver?
Great question. I think it's both. It's all of those things. So it's definitely the demographics, which I talked about a little bit earlier, which is that we know that the high school, there probably won't be another baby boomer generation, right? So we're not going to see as many high school students coming out of the traditional K-12 system entering into post-secondary education, especially directly after. There's also the labor market effects or forces as well. So increasingly, employers are requiring more from students who've pursued education, and that means having certain credentials, that means having certain certifications, being able to demonstrate certain skills. And so higher education really has to listen in and to the labor market, the workforce, to understand, well, what do we need to be providing our students to ensure that they are successful, to ensure that they get that first job out of college or after they finish their program, wherever it may be, because it might not be a traditional four-year college, it might be a four-year program, it might be something shorter than that. But have we given them the skills and credential that's recognized by employers in the labor market, so that they can feel that they had a return on their efforts and their time that they pursuing that career.
That really is a big change in the average student that we're thinking about. So we're not so much thinking about the 18-year-old who goes away to discover themselves, so much as the 24, 34, 54-year-old who has a different time scale and a different sense of convenience.
Absolutely.
When do you think we'll see adult learners become the majority of undergraduates?
So I don't know that I have the exact answer for that, but I can say that on some college campuses, we're already seeing that. So depending on where you're focused on the open access community college, many of those students, the majority of those students are non-traditional. And what we're seeing also is in the four-year space, so four-year institutions are finding ways to attract non-traditional students and to support them once they're on campus, because they understand that their enrollment and recruiting efforts are a lot more difficult, especially if you're just looking in that one demographic of 18-year-olds. Because even if that population was on an upswing, we know that
that leads to a very, very different environment.
College application process and enrollment process is very competitive anyway, and so it would be wise for institutions to really be focusing solely on a dwindling population, especially as competition remains pretty intense.
Do you think, well, that brings us to technology, which is a major concern of ours here at the Forum. We've been looking very hard at technology and how it influences teaching, learning, research. How are campuses starting to use technology to better support non-traditional students?
Focus on now is how colleges are using predictive analytics and adaptive technologies, which is basically using data looking at historical data to try to uncover patterns to predict future events. So being forward-looking rather than looking in the rearview mirror, looking backwards, as ways to engage students while they're on campus in a more consistent and regular basis than previously. So what we have previously is we assume that the traditional student is a well-prepared high school graduate. They're coming on campus, and we're just going to let them navigate this thing called a college pretty much on their own. And what we're realizing is that because of the shifting population of students that we are serving, they come with different needs. And this typically means that they probably have, well, one, they may be underprepared academically. They might have challenges integrating socially. And so how do we engage these students proactively rather than reactively when it may be too late to ensure that they are successful both in the classroom and outside of the classroom? And so one of the ways that colleges are beginning to do that, and this is both for traditional students and non-traditional population. They're not, segregating the kind of supports that will help any student really. Are early alert systems, which basically flag students at risk of not succeeding in a particular course, perhaps at the program level, or maybe just at the institution. So based off a set of information about that we could have about a student, maybe they came from the under-resourced high school, or perhaps they are transferring from a community college to a four-year college, and there are a set of challenges that come with that as being a transfer student. How do we ensure that we know what their challenges are and that we're able to intervene as soon as possible and when necessary to ensure that they can have a successful outcome, which means that they complete their courses, that the courses that they attempt, that they actually earn credits in them, and that they are making a steady progress toward and momentum toward graduation or program completion. So that's one of the ways, the early alerts. Another way that institutions are starting to experiment with are things called adaptive technology, which is basically courseware or platforms that could either be the way that an entire course is delivered, and it's usually right now it's being implemented mainly in these general education courses, so like the gateway courses or the introductory courses that the student mostly takes. And they're used, so it can be a whole course or it can be something that's more supplemental in a hybrid or online course where students can get prepared and brush up on material that they might not have recalled or remembered, or they're a little they need brushing up on, or maybe it's new material that they don't know that can provide some additional support and help them learn the material that's necessary in order to gain the skills that course has set out as a goal. And what's unique about the technology is that it records students' interaction, so the data, or something that we call learning analytics, which basically gives real-time or in near real-time understanding of how the student is understanding the material and how they're doing on certain assessments that either came with the product or that a faculty member would have put together to understand basically how is the student internalizing the information that the course material, the course content. And so that's another way that technology is being used to try to support students, engage them in new ways, and basically keep a hands-on, more laser-focused attention to students who, if we don't pay attention to, especially because of their additional needs, it might be problematic, and they might not fare well as a result.
I have a bunch of questions, but let me make sure that everybody gets a chance to participate. And let me just, for those of you who haven't been here before, or those of you who have and need a refresher, let me just remind you that there are three main ways that you can participate, depending on your comfort and your technology. So if you look at the very, very bottom of the screen, you'll see two orange dots. One has a hand and the word raise. If you click that button, that tells us that you'd like to come up on stage and join Manuela and I. So if your mic is working, your camera is working, and you feel like you have a great comment or a question, please click that and we'd be glad to bring you up. Now, if you'd rather type to us instead, because maybe you're shy or maybe because you're in a crowded environment or your mic doesn't work, that's fine. Click the Ask button and you can type in a question or a comment, and we can then display that and I'll read it out loud so we can see that. If those are enough for you, again, you can go over to Twitter and just tweet at, use the hashtag FTTE. If you'd like to tweet at I feel like I should call you Ms. Ikawa. She is EKOWO Higher Ed, and I am Brian Alexander. All three of those means are very powerful, and we're already getting questions and comments. So let's see. We've already had people tweeting appreciatively. We've had Carrie Watkins, Shelley Alcorn, and Vicky Romano jotting down notes about where we are so far. No direct question yet. Oh, hang on, we do have a question. Vicky has her hand up. Please, Shindig folks, knock me off and put Vicky up in my place.
Hi everyone. Just a quick clarification about the adaptive technology. Finding some terms are confusing me because I come from K-12 through teacher education, so I'm trying to figure out how we use these things. So for early alert, we have kind of like a homegrown system, but I know things like Starfish will do that a little bit more officially. When you're talking about adaptive, I'm trying to make that make sense in my mind. And I don't have large classes, so I come from a smaller institution. But are we looking at things like time on task, how many times they're entering in addition to the scores? And we have Canvas, so I can get at some of that, but are there other things that I'm missing with that adaptive piece?
Yes, sure. So I think the main thing that makes adaptive technologies a little different from maybe like an LMS where you can kind of keep track on what students are doing, if they're logging in, if they're reading course material. Is the underlying algorithms and predictive analytics that's designed in such a way that depending on how students interact with the actual platform, it will change what's displayed to the students. So if it's a math course and it's learning equations and they're getting stuck up on a particular math principle that they haven't quite mastered based off how they're either answering questions or responding to prompts, the adaptive tool will offer either more supplemental instructions. So it will offer maybe a video about how to solve this particular equation. Maybe it will offer a less challenging question to try to maybe boost their confidence and assess, okay, here's in the equation that here's the place in the equation where you got the wrong answer versus getting the right answer, and then moving on to the next module or whatever's next that needs to be done. Once they've mastered the equations, you go on to linear equations. Then the next session would be quadratic equations or what have you. Yeah. It would be a similar thing in a science course. But I can say that adaptive technologies, where they are currently, the state of them, are more efficient. They work more efficiently in the math, the hard maths, and the science courses, and less so in the fine arts or the humanities. And then I think one of the questions that we could be grappling with is if we want, based off the effectiveness of these tools, or if they're successful in actually improving student learning outcomes, do students prefer them over having not using any adaptive technology, rather just more traditional lectures, or maybe a combination of active learning and some other kinds of teaching and learning practices, but not necessarily adaptive tool. Do we want an adaptive technology for fine arts? Do we want an adaptive technology for a humanities course or religion course? And I think that's something that's an interesting question that we could be grappling with. But I think the current state of the technology as it is, it's really about the math and the sciences and at the introductory level courses.
Thank you.
No problem.
That's a great question. And Manuela, I think I could teach a seminar or plan a seminar based on your answer. My gosh. But just a quick note that came up. Someone asked in chat, the hashtag for this is FTTE. So if you want to tweet this or Instagram it, please use FTTE. But no time for me. We have Jeannie with a question. So Shindig folks, please bring her up on stage and kick me off.
Hi, good morning, or good afternoon in your case. I'm on the West Coast.
Hello.
I'm Jeannie Kim Han from Cal State University, Dominguez Hills, and I was sort of fascinated by your commentary because, you know, with the California State University system, we've been dealing with the population that you've been talking about for over 2 decades, right? So it's not new to us, and I think that that is something that should be made note of because there are a lot of comprehensive higher ed institutions that have been working with this population, and I think there's a lot of lessons learned that could be sort of spread out to the rest of the country that's starting to sort of grapple with this on a more day-to-day basis. But the second piece was I have actually been looking at a lot of technologies that are utilizing artificial intelligence to be able to help support what you've been talking about in relation to adaptive learning. Have you looked at companies like CenturyTech in London? I'm an advisor for them, but also I've sort of come across them in the sense of they are taking machine learning and using algorithms on the back end to be able to identify ways that the students are learning. Now, their platform is geared right now towards K through 12, but it's content agnostic. And so it allows for any user to be able to go in and to upload content, but it also creates a collaborative space where different teachers can come together and be able to provide information so that students that are interested in a particular area will then be able to sort of click on that area, and then the information, because of the AI behind it, is able to push additional pieces that they need in order to be able to learn. And it slowly basically understands how that student is learning. So my question is, are you familiar with those kinds of technologies that are out there globally? And if you are, could you name some other ones that might be of interest to us?
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's a great question. I haven't actually heard of Century Tools,
Tech.
Century Tech.
Mm-hmm.
Century Tech. So I haven't heard of that company, but definitely interested in learning more. It sounds like it's an open source kind of like platform, since anyone can kind of come on and use it and tailor it to their specific needs. What's interesting about that is that at least for the adaptive tech companies that are in the United States or based in the US and that we've spoken with here in New America, a lot of their algorithms and their products are proprietary, and so it's not really open for public use because it's part of their business model of how they that's how they survive.
CenturyTech is also private.
Okay, it's private. Okay. So that's interesting. I think I find that fascinating that it's kind of like, it seems like it's open source, that anybody can use it, and that it fits in K-12 classroom, it fits in higher ed, and I think one of the benefits to that is that if many people in many institutions and different kinds of institutions, different kinds of students are using it, that particular platform has a database potentially that they're collecting on all these different students, and it only helps it to improve it. And I think that's a fascinating opportunity. I'd like to look into that and learn more, because I think that will help inform the research that I'm doing, just to know what the different kinds of variations that are out there.
So the other part of that is that so CenturyTech, it is proprietary, and they're primarily in Europe right now, and so they're dealing with educational institutions in London, systems in Spain, and a few other locations. But one of the pieces that I found fascinating is that they're actually taking cognitive neurology and also doing some brain scans and neurological assessments as kids are engaged in these activities. And they're actually partnering with one of the universities here in the States to be able to monitor how the brain is reacting to this kind of stimuli, and then also sort of tracking how is it that learning or absorption of information changes as a result of different kinds of stimuli for different kinds of kids in different situations. So it's collecting all of that data simultaneously. And so I know that Carnegie Mellon University was initially doing some of that work, but I'm not sure where they are right now. They were focused on the STEM areas like you were talking about previously. But are there any other institutions or research entities that you know of that are in this space right now in the States or abroad?
Good question. I actually don't. But I think that the brain scanning cognitive neurology, it's really on the frontier. And so I think that, again, I was talking about like the current state of adaptive technology, at least here in the States. It's pretty novel, pretty new, and people are still learning about how these tools work, how they're even developed, who's developing them, who gets to say when the tool adapts or when it doesn't, who gets to say what kind of content or resources are being uploaded into the tool. So is it going to be faculty only that they're creating? Are you going to include OER based resources? And so I think we're still, for the most part, these companies are new. So like, for example, there's one organization that just sprang up maybe a year or two ago. And so I don't know that they're there yet, but I definitely see that that's on the horizon, absolutely, because it's part and parcel of how we understand how do humans learn, and that's what the education business is all about. How do they learn, and how do we help them learn? So I can definitely see that. That's definitely I don't think that's going away. I think it's the next step.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's an excellent question and a grand answer. I think, Jeannie, if you want to suggest any speakers for us to pursue on this, we've already had Larry Johnson and our first speaker, Audrey Waters, touching on this. But if there are any other people that you think are especially excellent, let us know. And you can do that through chat or whatever means you like. And of course, Manuela, if there's anybody that comes to mind, please let us know. It's obviously a subject of interest.
Absolutely.
Well, this is the time in the Future Trends Forum when we mingle. That is, our guest and myself jump off the stage and we hang out with all of you. And we take roughly the next 5 or 7 minutes to explore a question that has come up. And what I'd like to ask you all to think about is the use of predictive analytics and adaptive technologies that Manuela has articulated. Specifically, their use to help non-traditional students succeed. Are you seeing this on your campus or institution, or do you anticipate seeing it over the next few years? So take a few minutes and talk about this. Now, the way to do this is we are going to be able to talk to individuals here. So if you look around in your group right now, you'll see a whole bunch of people, a whole bunch of icons. Click on one of them and you will click together like Legos and you'll be able to talk. You'll have your own bubble of sound and video. You can form a group of 3 or even 4. Now, if you don't want to talk because either you're shy or your machines don't work or because you're in a crowded environment, that's perfectly fine. Just mouse over your own cursor and there's a little icon of a lock. Click that privacy lock. That way, no one can just stumble onto you and start yapping. They'll have to ask your permission first and you can politely decline. So for the next 5, maybe 7 minutes, let's find someone and talk about this. See where you think your institution is going in terms of adaptive analytics and predictive analytics. Okay, Shindig folks, bring us down to the crowd. Well, welcome back, folks. We're going to reassemble now after our mingle session. Shindig folks, if you could please bring Manuela back up on stage. Well, welcome back. Welcome back. What did you find in your mingle session? What ideas came up?
So I actually spoke a little further with Jeannie, and she was talking about how her institution has implemented predictive analytics and has done a lot of really interesting and innovative things. They actually won an innovation award because of the work that they've been doing. And she's working, she described her institution as a MSI, which is a minority serving institution. She talked about how 70% of the students are eligible for Pell Grant, which means that they are low income, and only 11% of the student body identify as white. And as a result of using the predictive analytics powered by or in partnership with EAB, which is a consulting firm, that they were able to double the graduation rate for first-time freshmen a few years. So that was pretty amazing, a great success story, especially in particular for that particular institution, being a minority-serving institution, which we know typically they're resourced, they have added challenges in moving the needle. So it was great to further connect with her, and I think we'll probably chat offline as well because she has some really interesting ideas.
Double the graduation rate. Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty astonishing. Well, good. And Jeannie, if you can hear me, if you want to add any more links or thoughts, please use your chat box. Or if you want to come up on stage again, let us know. Just click the raise hand or the ask button. We had a question come from Twitter, which I'd like to bring up. Hang on, just had it here. It's from Kelly Walsh. He wants to know, is there anything emerging about adaptive learning working better or worse with certain demographics? That's a great question.
That is a good question. So the only study that I'm aware of and that I've read recently came out of the Gates Foundation. They did evaluation of their adaptive learning technology. They used this study that were across multiple institutions and across different courses, so different academic disciplines, and they also used different products. And what they found is that there are a lot of implementation issues that impact effectiveness. I don't know that they came with any conclusions about whether the adaptive tools work better for certain student demographics, certain student populations over others, but it did show that using the intensity of the use matters. So if it's not enough to just buy these tools and tell faculty to use them, that the students actually have to be engaged with it in order to see impact, which kind of makes sense. And I think there were some other findings around certain courses, academic disciplines being more conducive to the tool, the class size impacting how the effectiveness, as well as how students responded. And that's something that we don't hear a whole lot about, the students' perception. So first-year students, not first-year students, but students at four-year institutions tended to not like the adaptive tools, the use of them, in comparison to students at community colleges or open access institutions. So in some ways, doesn't get at the effectiveness, but it does give a sense about a perception. And so if a student's at four-year institutions aren't really excited about using the tool, chances are they're probably not using the tool. And they're not going to use the tool, chances are it's not going to be very effective. And so there's a lot of things that go into measuring impact that I think that needs to be teased out more. And that was like one of the first studies that were done on it. So people got to have a lot of attention. But we have to understand again how very nascent these tools are and how nascent our understanding of how do they work best, how do we use them so that they actually we can maximize our effectiveness and impact, still to be determined. So I think that needs to be kept.
So this is really early days for research into this.
Yes.
Okay. That's not my quote. That's also on Twitter. That's Paul DB who said this. Well, let me just, before I have questions, and I have a ton of questions, and so you guys know I'll just take over and keep barraging them. So just letting you know that, again, if you have more questions and comments like Vicky and Jeannie's and Kelly's questions, please use the orange buttons to raise your hand or to type in the text or hit Twitter, and we'd be glad to ask. I'd like to turn this to the policy question, the governmental policy question, and wonder, Are you seeing state governments or the federal government beginning to emphasize predictive analytics and adaptive technology for learning?
Great question. Not really, which might not be a bad thing, right? Because these tools are just making their way on college campuses, and institutions are still grappling with how to use them, well, when to use them, and where they have the greatest effects. And so what we don't want to see is any policies coming out of the federal government to say do this, don't do that, but maybe room to explore, or even incentives, financial incentives always work, to explore and to experiment with these technologies to better understand their place or appropriate place on college.
Okay, so maybe that's something to look for down the road.
Yeah.
Well, if I go back to something, if I can read a little bit into what Vicky was saying and to what Jeannie is saying, and please, guys, if I'm getting this wrong, one of the angles that you were talking about was the way that we can use these technologies to help staff intervene and support people. So I mean, in a sense, there's a sense where the technology can act by itself. It can give dashboard information. It can give flags, like the Purdue University, for example, has a lot of innovative software for this. But I'm wondering if you could say a word about how we can use the technologies to motivate a human intervention. How can that work out?
So, well, one thing we have to do is we have to incentivize faculty and advisors to understand that their roles are shifting, and that this technology requires that we move from a reporting culture where we're just using our data to report to outside external stakeholders, to an engagement culture. And what an engagement culture would mean is that we are, first and foremost there for students, interacting with them, and we all care about their success, but we need to make that actionable, and that requires having conversations with students, knowing that maybe Jeannie talked about at her school, not only just bringing the technology, but restructuring the advising system at your school, maybe making it more centralized, or educating students so that they know that there's not just one point person, but there are multiple point persons, so that the process for engaging with faculty and support staff on campus is something that's feasible and something that's welcome and embraced. And so I think part of it, as a way to incentivize interaction or human action, is to know why they're there, and that it's no longer just having a 30-minute conversation or a 15-minute conversation at the beginning of a semester when the students register for courses, or at the end of the semester to figure out if they passed all their courses or not, but continually throughout that process that we're engaging with them, and that we're not keeping tabs on them, but that they're proactive, and that we're not reactive.
That would be a revolution. I mean, a quiet one, but a really significant one. I love that phrase. We're going from a reporting culture to an intervention one. And that's historic. Engaging, yes. Before I can pursue that, Paul B, man, you guys are too good with questions. Paul B has a question, but let me just, if we could flash it on the screen and I can read it out loud too. The question is, how is progress coming with digital credentialing between Lumina Foundation, CSW, and CLASP from a policy perspective? If you could, Manuela, could you say a word about those two acronyms, who CLASP is and CSW?
Sure. So CLASP is the Center for Law and Social Policy. It's another anti-poverty organization, think tank here based in Washington, D.C. I actually was previously at CLASP. And CSW, and CSW is the Center for Skilled Workforce. I didn't hear the question, so it was around. I'm sure it's around.
Oh, sure. I'm sorry.
I didn't hear the question.
No. I'm sorry. It was, how is progress coming along with digital credentialing between Lumina, CSW, and CLASP from a policy perspective? And Paul B, if you want to chime in, or if you want to take the stage, please let us know.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't think I'm the best person to speak on the digital credentialing space because, unfortunately, making my transition to New America, I kind of shifted my policy focus. But what I can say is that I know that the space is still very active, and I think that the introduction and the popularity, or not even just popularity, but just controversy, I would say, around digital badges are only elevating the conversation around digital credentialing. So, what does it mean to have a digital badge? Who recognizes it? How does it shift what we think about as quality in terms of quality credentialing and signaling to employers and to others that we have what it takes to do what it is whatever this credential says we can do. And so, I mean, the Lumina Foundation, CSW supports that work. CLASS is actively involved in that work. And all I can say that it's an active space, and it will continue to be because as we continue to think about quality in higher education, as we continue to introduce new players into the system, new providers, so these MOOCs and these boot camps, excuse me, they have their own certifications and ways that they mark what a student knows. There's the what is it called, blockchain. So there's so many different methods of stamping, if you will, what knowledge or the accumulation of knowledge, and so that's not going anywhere. We shift what higher ed looks like and how we deliver it. We may be shifting the end product that we hand out to students at the end.
You covered an awful lot in that answer, and I want to follow up on it, but we have another question. We have Jeannie, and Jeannie, tell you, after you have your hand raised, Shindig team, why don't you put Jeannie in my place so she can speak?
Okay. What about in relation to stacked degrees and micro degrees and competency-based education in relation to the policy space? And then also in relation to, what we've been using actually the predictive analytics for, sort of a secondary piece of it is around the personalized education for each student. So being able to understand what is it that individual student needs based on the big data analytics that we've done in sorting, the thousands of people that have come prior to, but then understanding what the case might look like for a particular individual that might have similar characteristics to the thousands prior, right? And so that combined with personalizing education, the micro degrees, stacked degrees, and competency-based education, in my mind, sort of all come together. Have you seen anything in that space and, policy-wise, et cetera?
Good question. So in terms of stackable credentials, CBE, CBE kind of came under fire, and our director here at New America, Amy Layton, she's a CBE guru, and she would definitely be able to answer this a lot more comprehensively than I would. But so it came under fire under this particular issue of Western Governors University, which is like the pioneer in this space, came under fire about whether or not there was if the students in these CBE programs were having meaningful and sustained interaction with students, and they're showing that absolutely. And what's really I find fascinating about this whole discussion or controversy or just confusion, if you will, is that at the same time we're trying to say that we want to personalize education, we want to make it so that it's convenient for students, and we want to ensure that there's success, and that we're questioning whether or not what I think CBE is, like you said, there are ways to find out how do I personalize this experience for this particular student. That to me is like the clearest example of engagement and like relatedness to the student, and the fact that we're questioning whether we have regular substantive interaction is interesting. But I think what's to come or what to look for, hopefully, is in the reauthorization of the Higher Education Act. And we don't know. I mean, in this political environment, who's to know how that really is going to come out or shake out at the end. at the end of the day, but that would be, I would think, the place that they would address it, since that's that particular provision or issue is in the Higher Education Act. And then your second question was around the use of big data to personalize education. Can you repeat that second piece? What was the question?
Well, so I'm wondering if you have examples of any institutions that you've come across that are really utilizing big data analytics to be able to create cases to apply then to the current student, right? To personalize education and services, supports, whatever it is that they might need.
Sure. So, I mean, in the sense of the use of predictive analytics for early alert systems, as well as, which I didn't talk a whole lot about, the recommender system. So these are like program recommender systems. So how to use historic data to understand how current students will fare in certain majors or certain degree programs. That's definitely, I'm not going to say widespread, but there are some institutions that are using these recommender systems. For example, Austin Peay University in Tennessee, as well as Georgia State University in Atlanta. They have their recommender systems that in some ways personalize the academic journey of a student based off big data. And then in very much so, I think the interventions that come out of early alert systems, there's a flag on a student because they're missing class or they're not doing well in a particular class. That's where a faculty or an advisor could come in and say, hey, what's going on? What's working? And how do we change this so that we can ensure that we can either get you back on track or maybe shift to a comparable major, maybe not a different major, but a comparable one that will be more suited to your interests and to your strengths. And so I think in some ways that's how institutions currently are using big data to try to personalize either the instruction, but the program a student is in, and the experience, the overall experience, to ensure that they can get the most out of their time there.
Perfect. Thank you.
Problem.
More great conversation. I'm really, really glad to have a chance to race through these issues with you. I have one more question to ask myself, and this is a biggie, I'm afraid, and we don't have too much time, which is, how are you seeing technology issues start to appear in the Higher Ed Act reauthorization? Do you think we'll see Congress pushing for more distance learning or for more adaptive learning or predictive analytics? What do you think? I'm sorry, it's a big question, I know.
That's a good question. Fortunately, I think that the landscape where we are currently, we're still in the experimental phase. And we don't have enough advocates trying to push anything in the law, which may not, again, be a bad thing. I think the closest we have to it are these experimental sites, which are working with non-traditional providers, so boot camps and other non-higher education, non-traditional higher education institutions that they provide post-secondary training. So, being allowed or welcomed into the federal financial aid program, which is a big step, but that just happened last week. And so here's an example of opening up to innovation, and these boot camps have a technology focus because a lot of them are coding and things of that nature. So it's tech related. It is not, but it's not the technology that we're talking about. So the use of big data or adaptive technologies. But we see the Department of Education moving in a way that will open up opportunities to do things differently and using different resources, different entities to help students, specifically students who have not been served particularly well by the traditional higher education system. So they're finding other ways to get quality skills and training, why not support them and see how that goes?
And that comes back perhaps to Kelly's question about which populations are doing best and which ones aren't doing as well with this.
That would be a great way to find out. if
those experimental sites seem really large.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have, I think, time for one last question, which is we've been talking about the powers and abilities of all of these, specifically about data analytics and adaptive software. In the last minute that we've got, can you say what you think the biggest challenges and drawbacks are, if we haven't already mentioned them?
Sure. So, I mean, for me, the biggest challenges would be thinking about acknowledging that we're excited, but also being willing to be honest about what are the limitations to a data-driven higher ed ecosystem. So being sure that we have the right data, being sure that we have enough data to make the predictions that we say we're making. So a lot of institutions say that they predict which students predict which students are going on to get off track in the third week of a course. They can predict which students will enroll or won't enroll. And it's like, okay, yeah, you have predictive analytics, but understand that you can't predict everything, right? We can't predict the single mom whose child gets sick midway through the semester, but the child did get sick, the student and the mom didn't show up for class. And so understanding that there are limitations to these seemingly very powerful technologies and tools that we can only fix so far. We can't predict everything. Another fear of mine is that we would, I think it's a fear of a lot of people, that we would replace technology with people, and there is no substitute for a human being. We know that, and so as advanced as we get and as high tech as we get, we have to understand that the human component is relevant and necessary. And kind of tagged on to that is just not only replacing people with technologies, but investing in technology without also investing in people and structure and resources that really go hand in hand. If we want our technologies to be successful on college campus, it's not just going to be the tool, it's going to be what surrounds it that's going to be also very essential. And I think with all of this, we have to be sure that we are good stewards of technology and of student data, because that is going to make or break whether or not higher education, one, is seen as a serious innovator, but two, is going to get the support either from the public, the federal government, state legislators to continue to innovate, right? And so we need to have early successes. I think that's really important, because all we need is one predictive analytics gate, and then the door to innovation gets it's closed. We don't want that, and so that's going to be really important that we're careful and that we have early wins, but we also cautious about the things and the limitations of these analytics, that we cannot predict everything. That's key. And so I think that wraps up. I think that would wrap up my time.
That covers a lot. My gosh, Manuela, that's a terrific overview. I have to say, we're out of time, but I want to thank you so much for adding so much to our understanding. On behalf of the forum community, you really expanded it. I look forward to bringing you back, maybe in a few months, as things change. That would be great. That would be great. If you have a few minutes, stick around in case people want to chat. But right now, I have to kick you off stage so I can bring up the slides for next week. Thank you again for coming.
Thank you.
I just tweeted earlier today about a new predictive analytic program coming out of Purdue called Academic Forecast, and I just put that in the chat box there. So next week, we have another guest who's going to take a look at things from a very, very different point of view. If we could advance to the next slide, please. We have the co-author of a new book called Education is Not an App. Jonathan Reese is a historian at another California State University. Jeannie, I didn't catch which CSU you are. I don't know if it was at Pueblo, but this one's at CSU Pueblo. Is going to be discussing what he thinks of are the limitations and abilities of combining technology with education. So that should be a very, very exciting topic. I'm looking forward to it. Now, in the meantime, one other notes before we go, we have our ongoing reading continues with reading near future science fiction. So a bunch of people are looking at Ready Player One, which has some interesting things to say about digital education as well as near future society. And as well, if you'd like to learn more about what's going on with future trends and with Shindig, we have a couple of URLs here for you to learn more. I'll stick around here for a few minutes to chat with you guys, but otherwise, thank you so much for the great questions and great commentary. And again, thanks to our guest, Manuela, and thanks to our hosts, Shindig. You guys did a great job. See you all next time. Bye-bye.